This farm doesn't raise animals, it raises zombies. In front of them stood a zombie who used to be a mailman, now chained to a mailbox, shuffling back and forth with letters in hand, still dropping them in as if on his daily route. A few passing survivors witnessed this bizarre sight and were instantly stunned, their jaws practically hitting the ground. And that wasn't all. On the nearby grass, a zombie pushed a wheelbarrow, while another chopped firewood, all continuing the work they did while alive, as if clinging to a sliver of human consciousness. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all our dear fans. This is your favorite zombie channel. Today we're diving back into the classic zombie film Survival of the Dead, the sequel to Diary of the Dead, and the final zombie movie directed by George A. Romero. The sequel dropped the found footage style of its predecessor, and although its ratings were lower, it introduced some fresh ideas. For example, some zombies began to show signs of intelligence, feeding on animals instead of humans, while people started attempting to tame them in hopes of coexisting. The story takes place a few weeks after the zombie outbreak, when the world has completely fallen apart and humanity is on the brink of extinction. The few remaining survivors roam endlessly, searching for a place to call safe. Before the disaster, Crockett was a soldier, and now he leads what's left of his team, desperately seeking a zone untouched by the undead. But in a world full of danger, casualties are unavoidable, and their group has shrunk from over a dozen down to just a few. Each time a teammate dies, Crockett silently keeps watch, waiting for them to turn, then ends their misery with a heavy heart. And it's not just zombies they have to fight. Conflicts with other survivors over resources are just as deadly. To survive in this apocalypse, you have to be tougher than the rest, and that's exactly why Crockett is still alive. Meanwhile, on a remote island, the survivors haven't escaped the zombie threat either. Two major families live there, and they're deeply divided over how to deal with the zombies. Led by Patrick, the O'Flynn family believes in a straightforward solution: kill them all. To Patrick, once someone turns, they're no longer human. They're the walking dead and deserve to be laid to rest. Every day, he and his kin patrol the island, killing any zombie on sight. But Seamus, leader of the Muldoon family, believes the opposite, that zombies and humans can live together in peace. He's discovered that zombies retain some human awareness and aren't just mindless monsters. Seamus even dreams of domesticating them, teaching them to stop eating humans and feed on animals instead. That way, people could live alongside zombies, and even if a loved one turns, they could still remain part of the family. This ideological clash turns the two families into bitter enemies. But Patrick's daughter, Janet, sides with the opposition. She believes her father's methods are too cruel and refuses to harm zombified relatives. Patrick ignores her emotional pleas and sticks to his beliefs. That very night, he leads an armed group to a local family's home. Just days earlier, the couple's two children had tragically died in a car crash. As we learned in the first film, the dead always rise as zombies, so Patrick came to check if their kids had turned. But when he asked, the parents hesitated and claimed their children were fine, just sleeping upstairs. Patrick didn't buy it and insisted on going up. Suddenly, the woman pulled a gun, shouting a warning. Patrick hadn't expected it to come to this. The man, devastated by his wife's death, held her lifeless body, but Patrick coldly told him to finish the job. Outnumbered and overwhelmed, the man had no choice but to obey. Eventually, the group made it upstairs, and just as they suspected, the two kids were already dead, zombified and chained tightly to the bed. Patrick hesitated, struggling to pull the trigger. Just as he was about to fire, his rival Seamus appeared and stopped him. With superior numbers, Seamus forced Patrick to surrender his weapons. Although Seamus didn't harm Patrick, he decided to exile him from the island to prevent any further trouble. From that point on, Plum Island would belong to just one family, a family that believed in peaceful coexistence with zombies. A few people chose to continue following Patrick and boarded a small boat to leave Plum Island, but Janet decided to stay behind. But Patrick wouldn't let it go so easily. So the moment he left Plum Island, he immediately began planning his next move. He deliberately recorded a video and posted it online, falsely claiming that Plum Island was safe and had plenty of food, hoping to attract survivors and use them as leverage against Seamus. Crockett and his team came across the video, but he grew suspicious, thinking it might be a trap. After all, only a fool would advertise a safe haven like that online. Crockett believed they should stay the course and keep searching for their own safe zone. But others in the group couldn't resist the temptation and eventually voted to turn back and check it out. Meanwhile, Patrick and his group waited at the dock to Plum Island, a place far from secure, where even fishing could reel in zombies. Soon, they spotted a vehicle approaching. It was Crockett and his crew. Patrick quickly called out, asking their purpose, and Crockett replied that they were heading to Plum Island. Patrick immediately offered to take them there for free using his boat. But during the conversation, a horde of zombies suddenly appeared, plunging both sides into chaos. The zombie horde crept toward the wooden cabin where Patrick's group was holed up, forcing them to open fire, but there were too many, and someone was quickly taken down. Seeing the situation deteriorate, Crockett's group decided to find their own boat. Francisco, a strong swimmer, jumped into the water to reach a cargo ship across the way. Unaware that zombies lurked underwater, he was suddenly grabbed by one. But Francisco didn't panic. He bit off the zombie's fingers with his teeth and broke free. He successfully climbed aboard the cargo ship, only to find more zombies waiting inside. Without hesitation, he grabbed a nearby fire extinguisher and shoved it into the zombie's mouth, blasting its head from within. Tomboy soon joined him on the ship, and fortunately, the vessel was still operational, so they turned it around to pick up the others. Back at the cabin, Patrick's group wasn't so lucky. His men were overwhelmed and devoured one after another until only Patrick escaped. Faced with the ravenous horde, Patrick calmly pulled out a bundle of explosives, lit the fuse, and tossed it into the crowd of zombies. Just as Crockett's cargo ship was about to leave the dock, Patrick leapt on board, barely avoiding falling into the water. Luckily, Tomboy was there to pull him up at the last second. With Patrick now aboard, they followed his directions and began sailing toward the island. But something seemed off with Francisco. His pained expression made it clear he had already been infected. Then Tomboy was called away by Crockett. It turned out they were planning to sweep the entire cargo ship to eliminate any potential threats. Sure enough, the cargo hold still held zombies, and after they cleared them all out, the ship finally approached Plum Island. Since the island didn't have a dock for large ships, they had to transfer to a smaller boat to reach land. By the next morning, the group had successfully set foot on the island. Only then did Crockett ask Patrick the obvious question. If the island was so great, why was he at the dock? As they walked, Patrick explained some of the basics about the island. A river split the island in two. One side belonged to his O'Flynn family, the other to the Muldoon family led by Seamus. The two families had lived in peace for years, but recent conflicts over expanding the graveyard created tension. To avoid further escalation, Patrick claimed he chose to leave the island. He insisted the reason he posted the video was simply because the island was a good place, and he wanted survivors to have a safe haven. But clearly, Patrick wasn't telling the whole truth. When they arrived at a farm, they saw zombies chained up by Seamus. Wasn't the island supposed to be safe? Why would anyone be keeping zombies? Just as Crockett was about to ask, a gunshot rang out from the woods, forcing everyone to take cover. Patrick immediately said it was Seamus's men who fired the shot, and the zombies were also being raised by them. A firefight broke out. One of the soldiers was shot, and Crockett took a bullet to the shoulder. Tomboy took out the shooter, who appeared to be acting alone. But when the dust settled, they realized their teammate who was shot in the chest had died. Devastated by the loss, Crockett swore to take down Seamus and agreed to join forces with Patrick. What he didn't realize was that it was all part of Patrick's plan to eliminate Seamus and retake control of the island. After setting Crockett's group up in a wooden cabin, Patrick quietly slipped away to rally the rest of his remaining followers. But Tomboy quickly realized that Francisco had vanished, so she rushed outside to search for him and finally found him in a vegetable patch. It was only then that Tomboy learned Francisco had been infected. Francisco didn't want to become a zombie. He just wanted to find a peaceful place to end it all before he turned. But he couldn't bring himself to pull the trigger, so he begged Tomboy to do it for him. With no other choice, Tomboy granted his final wish. What she didn't expect was that the gunshot would draw unwanted attention. It was Seamus's men. Tomboy was captured, and just as Patrick was returning with his followers, he saw the whole thing happen. But he didn't dare act recklessly, so he went straight to meet up with Crockett. At this moment, Tomboy had already been tied up inside Seamus's house. Seamus didn't harm her. Instead, he even offered her a meal. He casually asked why she had come to the island and if she had any companions. Tomboy lied, saying she came alone. But Seamus already knew the truth. Turns out there were two of Seamus's men at the farm shootout. They had only killed one, and the other had escaped to report back. Seamus figured Patrick must have said terrible things about him. Otherwise, Tomboy and the others wouldn't have sided against him. He then told Tomboy that everything he did was to help people who had lost loved ones reunite with them, even after death. Tomboy was stunned. This man really was deranged. Suddenly, a noise came from the kitchen. Tomboy turned to look and was nearly scared to death. The one preparing their dinner was a zombie. None other than Seamus's undead wife. Seamus tried to convince Tomboy to join his cause, but by now, she was completely shaken. Meanwhile, Patrick rushed back to the cabin and told Crockett that Tomboy had been taken. They immediately set off to storm Seamus's home and rescue her. Even Patrick's estranged daughter Janet showed up and tried to stop him from going, but Patrick wouldn't back down. It was time to settle the score with Seamus once and for all. What no one expected was that Seamus had already anticipated their attack and was fully prepared. He used Tomboy as leverage, threatening to feed her to the zombies if they didn't drop their weapons. Crockett wanted to fight back, but it wasn't worth the risk. Tomboy had saved Patrick at the dock, and he didn't want to gamble with her life, so they all surrendered their weapons. In truth, Seamus didn't want to kill them. If he had, Patrick would have been dead the moment he was exiled. And even now, Seamus still hadn't delivered the final blow. He just wanted to prove that he was right, that zombies could be tamed and that humans and zombies could live in peace. Seamus believed he was saving the world because the virus would never go away. As long as people die, zombies will exist. If zombies could stop eating humans, everything could be solved. And his experiment had started to show results. The female zombie locked in the cage looked exactly like Janet. She was Patrick's youngest daughter and Janet's twin sister, Jane. At this point, Seamus wanted to conduct a demonstration. He would show everyone whether Jane would eat a horse or not. Patrick was intrigued and sat quietly, waiting for the outcome. But just before the test began, Janet emerged from the woods, secretly carrying weapons. Clearly, she was still worried about her father's safety, and since Crockett's group had better firepower, a sudden reversal took place. Sensing the shift, Seamus's most trusted man betrayed him and tried to switch sides. Seamus wouldn't allow it. He shot the traitor in the thigh. That's when Janet saw her sister Jane inside the cage, slowly approaching, as if recognizing her. Janet let her guard down and reached toward her, but Jane bit her hard. Patrick blamed Seamus for all of it and angrily opened fire on him. A full-blown firefight broke out instantly, and the traitor shot open the fence, releasing all the zombies inside. He lured them toward Seamus's side, intending to go down with them, but he was the first to be torn apart. With zombies now flooding the battlefield, everything descended into chaos. While bullets flew, they also had to dodge zombie attacks. One by one, people on both sides were overwhelmed. Wanting to end the bloodshed, Patrick shouted for Seamus to come out and settle things one-on-one. Everyone stopped firing, ready to watch the showdown. Seamus stepped out from behind the tree, but Janet didn't want anything to happen to her father. Before she turned, she wanted him by her side. Moved by his daughter's words, Patrick told Seamus to end the fight and said that if Seamus could prove he was wrong, he would leave the island forever. But Seamus didn't play fair. He shot Patrick in the back just as he was walking away. No! Still, Patrick managed to fire back from the ground and hit Seamus. Seeing this, Crockett immediately chose to leave, while Janet, who stayed behind, saw her sister gnawing on the horse. It turned out Seamus was right. Zombies could eat animals. This made Janet realize that zombies really could change their taste and stop eating people. Excited, she ran after Crockett and the others, eager to share the good news. But before she could say a word, she was shot in the head by Patrick, who had just arrived. Clearly, Patrick hadn't seen the moment the zombie bit the horse, so he still clung to his belief, even if it meant killing the person closest to him. Patrick and Crockett went their separate ways, but Patrick didn't get far before collapsing from his previous gunshot wound and dying on the spot. Meanwhile, Crockett sailed away from the island on the cargo ship, continuing his journey to find a land free of zombies. In the film's final scene, even after turning into zombies, Patrick and Seamus clung to their deep-rooted obsession, raising their guns and firing at each other the moment they met again. The film centers on the conflict between two families with opposing views on how to handle zombies. It's clear that Seamus was more emotionally driven, even to the point of madness. To keep his zombified wife by his side, he chained her up in the kitchen. Believing that zombies still retained a trace of humanity, he set out to tame them, hoping to save the world through this idea. But such a belief was far from practical. Raising zombies isn't like keeping a pet. There are countless unknowns, and you can't change their bloodthirsty nature. The moment they feel hunger, they become deadly. Besides, zombies have huge appetites and only eat meat, dozens of pounds a day. The average household simply can't afford that. Even from the zombies' perspective, they wouldn't want to live this way, so maybe Patrick was right to give them peace through death, even if his method seemed cold and heartless. Survival of the Dead introduced some new ideas, but not many. Its overall tone remained stuck in the style of the 1970s and 80s, which may explain why it received such low ratings. That's it for today's video. Thank you, my dear zombie fans, for watching. See you next time.